Hey everyone, welcome to a weekend edition of the Locked On Vikings podcast. My name is Luke. Things are going to be a little bit different today in light of the weekend's tragic news. Khyree Jackson, Vikings rookie, passed away in a car accident over the weekend, early on Saturday morning. And so I wanted to, I guess, do what I think is the right thing to do with a podcast when you have a platform that a lot of people listen to, which is definitely not to ignore it or just to wait till Monday or whatever. But I wanted to, I guess, get a few things out there. A lot of people asked me about the Everyman series and are you still going to do it? And in a sense, yes, obviously context changes, but a lot of you seemed to really still want his story out there on this platform as much as it already is on The Athletic and on Alabama stuff and Oregon stuff and all that. There's a lot of tellings of this story, and I think there deserves to be. But I think in a grander sense, this is, I don't know, maybe I'll just get really personal. So this is the way that I deal with it. Look, at a certain age, you're going to have lost people. It's just how life is. People die. And for me, one of the best ways I have to process that is to examine who that person was in their life and all of that, and ask kind of like what inspires me about that person, and to try to embody that as a way of kind of carrying on the memory. And I won't, be any more specific than that. Obviously, that's really personal, but that's kind of what I want to do today. And the Everyman series kind of is perfect for that. It is the point of it is to find things about these people that we identify with, that inspire us, that impress us or whatever. And of course, Khyree Jackson's story, you may already be familiar with it from a lot of stuff that I have cited here. There's a great article at The Athletic from Alec Lewis. There is an article at something called the I-5 Corridor, which is a Substack about the Oregon Ducks that tells a lot of that story as well. Some other stuff like a Washington Post article from way back when he was in high school in the DC area. So that's what I want to do today. And the reason this is coming out on Sunday and not on Monday like usual is because I wanted to take this out of the Monday through Friday cadence, specifically so that we could just talk and I wouldn't have to interrupt it with like this episode of Locked On Vikings was brought to you by. I really didn't want to do that on this one. It just felt kind of exploitative and I didn't want to do that, but I still want to like talk to you all about it. And I think that that's important. So here we are on Sunday with a bit of a different thing. And this will kind of serve as the discussion we have on it. I might maybe mention it in passing in tomorrow's real episode, but this is where we are today. So if you're not interested in that or whatever, that's totally fine. I'll see you on Monday. Everything will stay pretty normal. But I guess what I want to do is tell the story. I guess first off, I should give you the news as it is reported in the very Associated Press dry way. But basically what we know, at least as of me recording, is at around 3 a.m. on Saturday morning, Khyree Jackson was riding in the car with a couple of his high school teammates in Maryland, around DC, where he grew up. And he was hit by a car he got hit by a car trying to change lanes. Their car kind of swerved off into the woods, into tree stumps, and that was that. In terms of the driver that was going too fast and tried to change lanes, police say, and I'm going to be very careful with the wording here, they suspect alcohol was involved. That is obviously very probabilistic, very speculative wording, and so I'm going to keep it speculative for now. I'm not coming here trying to Nancy Drew anything. You can go somewhere else for that. But suffice it to say, don't drink and drive. Even if that turns out not to be a factor here, it's still worth saying. Always, pretty much. Don't drink and drive. And I know that for some people, like, that answer can be the comfort and just the discussion, I guess, about grief, which can be weird when it's, let's be honest, a parasocial relationship. The vast majority of you don't personally know Khyree Jackson or anybody in his family or anything like that. Maybe some of you do, but most of you don't. But you probably still feel kind of angry about this or sad, some kind of emotion, and that's normal. That's perfectly normal and valid. So for me, I'm gonna do what helps me. which is to tell the story and to celebrate who Khyree Jackson was, which seems very much worth celebrating, at least from my kind of secondhand perspective, the best perspective that I have on it. I think maybe the best place to pick up this story is the 2015 Class 4A state championship, Wise High School, absolutely destroying Howard High School. This game would end 55-6 for a state championship, and Khyree Jackson was on the sideline for it. He had hurt his collarbone, and it left a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, for sure. This like feeling of being like caged on the sideline while your teammates go out and do this whole thing without you, and fight this fight without you. Obviously happy to have been part of a team that won, but it's bittersweet when you're injured and you can't participate. Khyree Jackson was a transfer to Wise High School that year as well, and he was like one of these kids that you were really excited to get. But before, he was in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is, all of this is kind of around the D.C. area, and he transferred to Wise High School and was supposed to kind of be this like superstar receiver. The year after, he would absolutely be a superstar receiver for that high, but he would still struggle in the recruitment process. He got a lot of interest. He absolutely put out the tape that got him a ton of D1 interest, but nobody could give him an offer because of his grades. And we kind of see this like hurdle that will absolutely neutralize so many football careers, no matter how good a kid is. If your grades aren't there and you can't go to college, for so many kids, that's it. And we tend to study the exceptions to that rule, but make no mistake, it is a rule. If your grades aren't there, you're done. But I want you to kind of remember that moment on the sideline of being told he can't do it is just this like unacceptable thing. And when you're literally physically injured and you're not allowed to go in, obviously there's nothing you can do about that, and just how uncomfortable that is, to where in future instances when he is told you can't do it, unless that is like he's physically restrained, he's just not going to listen anymore. And maybe that's the first like admirable thing about Khyree Jackson that's potentially worth emulating. It is at this juncture where Khyree Jackson will have a decision to make. He can go D2, where he can kind of deal with the academics that way and try to go through a D2 school, or he can do the JUCO thing, try to get his grades up, and then spin that into a D1 scholarship. The JUCO route is way riskier. Lots of kids go D2 and have plenty good football careers. They get a degree through it, which is, if you are talking to Khyree Jackson's mom, which a lot of the Alec Lewis story is told through her eyes. If you ask her, she's like, go get a degree, please. Obviously that's going to be the more important thing, because the NFL is a long shot for everybody. Even no matter how good you are, you still have to, like, there's still just that probability that you'll get shut out, that you won't get along with the coach the way you thought you would, and then maybe you'll fall behind. Like, so many things can happen to 5-star, perfectly good recruits that make the NFL a distant kind of pipe dream. So it's really easy to look at it that way, but Khyree Jackson did not ever look at it that way. And he's going to go the JUCO route, where he knows he's going to be able to get playing time and where he can get to D1 theoretically after like 1 year. He's 17 at this point, and he goes to Arizona Western Community College, which is like near the Mexico border, like deep in the desert. And he and his mom go out there. They fly to San Diego and then drive out from there. And she drops him off. They will talk on the phone a little bit sometimes. And to hear her tell it, she's like, something was a little different. Something felt wrong. He didn't have that same kind of boisterous, light up a room personality. And it's interesting trying to glean the personality of somebody that you've never met through these kind of testimonials, especially posthumously, where everybody will use the light up a room kind of cliche thing. But he did have this energy and this charisma that made a lot of people gravitate toward him. And maybe that's another thing worth emulating, is that he was very unapologetically himself all the time. And most people liked it, but he really didn't care if you didn't. teammates at Alabama and Oregon eventually, even Vikings teammates here that only knew him for a couple months are going like, man, that dude was the best, and, you know, I'm going to miss him. But in his brief time at Arizona Western Community College, he wasn't that. And his mom could tell, and it was wrong. And then one day he showed up on their doorstep, and he had dropped out. He was coming. He had all his stuff, and he was coming home. For whatever reason, he wasn't ready. It didn't work out. And again, this is where it ends, right? This is where he's like, okay, now I got to get a job. I'm done with high school. I dropped out of community college. Now I got to figure out a way to make ends meet here. He'll go through a number of odd jobs. One was at Chipotle making burritos. He worked at Six Flags as a custodian. But the one that you probably have heard of was at the deli section of a supermarket called Harris Teeter. And his mother was very excited to learn that he had his like picture on the wall. He'd won Employee of the Month. You might have heard the Employee of the Month thing. I think the Vikings actually tweeted out a thing about this part of this particular chapter. And she's like, oh, look at you. Like, you did it. And I think she was happy to see him like engaged in something real, because she still didn't really understand where his head was at. Because for to hear him talk about it in like he had was asked about it in his post-draft interview with the media, and the way he talked about it, he was like, oh yeah, I did get that, was interesting. Like he kind of didn't seem to care. And that's because in his mind, this was still an intermission. This was still just like an interruption on the journey to the NFL, where I'm definitely gonna go. He never had a doubt, even in this moment, that it was gonna happen, right? Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, because he did have his NBA 2K thing where he loved to play NBA 2K, and at a certain point, he was actually thinking about going pro for that. But either way, this deli job was not the career path. This was not the future. This was just a temporary stop on a winding road. But to his mom, it's like, hey, no, like, engage in this. Like, this is actually can turn into a good job. You can move up the ladder. They have health and benefits. You can actually make a living for yourself here in, there's no shame in that, right? And build your life out from there. And yeah, football will be over, but you'll look back on it and say, yeah, I was pretty good at high school football. That was great, but let me go to like my home that I own. You know, like this, you can really build a life there. That was, I guess, the thing she didn't quite understand yet. And, you know, he would say, no, mom, I'm going pro doing 2K. And she goes like, or you could like have a job. Like, come on. But Khyree Jackson always had that big starry-eyed dream in a way that only someone, I think, in like their late teens, early 20s can, which I think is also worth admiring and perhaps emulating, even if you're past that part in your life. That there is very much like a will not be denied persistence to it. Also, unbeknownst to his mother, he was emailing other community colleges for another chance at playing JUCO football the next year. He would get a bite from Fort Scott Community College. At this point, by the way, he kind of figured football was basically over and he was really going into the 2K thing. But he gets an email back from Fort Scott Community College, and he goes to there. He would take that deal, and this place sucked. It's a community college. He was sharing a dorm with like 24 other people, sharing a bathroom with like 24 other people. It was like dingy. The description in the Alec Lewis article is fantastic. Alec Lewis is such a great writer. But suffice to say, these were not comfortable conditions. But it was different here. It was less comfortable than it was at Arizona Western. But I think maybe just a year older and a year more ready to be on his own and a little bit more determined, he was not going to leave this. And I think that might be that's like an inflection point here where you realize, okay, this is a serious pursuit. And it's no longer a pipe dream. This is a mountain that he is climbing. And the conditions here and all that are not going to, that's the last thing that was going to deter him. Also, to this point, he had played receiver. He played receiver mostly in high school. He played receiver at Arizona Western. I think he didn't even make it to the first game. Maybe played like one game there before he left, but he was a receiver. And he went to his coach and said, I know you love me at receiver here. And his coach is like seeing shades of Randy Moss because he's 6'4" and fast. And he goes to his coach and he says, I think I should be a DB, actually. My home is at defensive back, which is not true. Like, he was not a D-back at the time. I don't know. It's still unclear why he said this, but I guess that's he just had an instinct. He wanted to be a DB. And he had broached the idea of this position switch. His high school coach learned of this, again, like was asked about this in the Alec Lewis article, and was like, haha, yeah, he would do that. Like, totally made sense to him. So I think this might just be a Khyree Jackson being Khyree Jackson thing. So the position coaches, the D-backs coach and the receivers coach, like, talk to each other and say, okay, we'll give him 2 days. You go try out being a corner for 2 days, see how it feels. Likely you're going to come back here and stay being a receiver. But at corner, he was really right. Like, it was really natural. The hip fluidity and a particular kind of athleticism, and just being 6'4" and really athletic. It was like, oh, this is unique now. He's not just a fast and tall guy, which you put at receiver. Like, if he can play natural corner, there really are pro aspirations. This could be real. And he puts out insane tape at cornerback at Fort Scott. So much so that he starts getting D1 people to sniff around. But he wants a little more exposure. Look, Fort Scott Community College is not going to exactly get you on the map. So he transfers to Eastern Mississippi Community College, the last chance U. If you're going to be in JUCO, like, this is the college. Unfortunately, that was the COVID season, and Eastern Mississippi Community College would not have a football season that year. But fortunately for Khyree Jackson, he had already very much done enough. Just by, I think, being on the radar of Eastern Mississippi Community College, he had done enough to get then on the radar of SEC coaches. And I think the moment it really clicks for both him and his mom is when they're talking to Nick Saban. First off, just the gravity of, like, I'm talking to Nick Saban, but also the deference there. The idea that, oh, these guys actually want me. I'm not trying to convince them anymore. The way Alec Lewis put it was like, I'm doing the interviewing instead of being interviewed. That he'll end up going to Alabama. He would get 33 D1 offers. Like, that was how good his tape was at Fort Scott. He was very clear, like, that there was a vision here for a 6'4" fast corner, with the reach to, like, get their hands into every little ball and to win all the jump balls and stuff like that. There was a lot of really cool vision here. But at Alabama, it didn't really come to fruition the way that he had hoped. He was in a dastardly competition for playing time alongside Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry. Both these guys went, top 50? And he actually did get the playing time over those two guys. He would earn the start, but I think it was week 2 against Texas that he kind of had this, like, fall apart game, and he would get benched over that, and then he got suspended for violating a team rule. I don't know what that was about. I don't think it's particularly important. And before you know it, he's in the transfer portal looking for a place where he can get more playing time. That turned out to be Oregon, and it's in Oregon where he really makes his name as a cornerback. He is this, like, everybody talks about, wow, he's this raw talent if you can just put it together, And even when he gets to the Vikings as a draft pick, that's kind of the vibe is, oh my goodness, the potential here is through the roof. People are really excited about him, and that makes his passing all the more tragic. Oh, what could have been? He could have been one of these great, like, NFL comeback stories. But I think we have to get our minds out of the NFL-centric rut that we can be in, especially on a show that covers an NFL team. And whether it's the persistence and the determination, whether it's just the idea of being really kind to everyone all the time, or the idea of how much hard work can carry you forward, especially if the dynamics keeping you out, the things that are gatekeeping you are things like grades for football. That has nothing to do with football at the end of the day. Or just, I'm at Fort Scott Community College, and if they saw me, they would love me, but they're not going to find me. Khyree Jackson has already done plenty to be worth remembering. Just getting to that point. Like, he didn't need an NFL career to be inspiring. And he had already accomplished plenty to be proud of. Things will resume as normal tomorrow. And as always, Skull.